Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Ed Fields here, along with Rogan Smith on Ed Fields Live, and Kendrick Williams, our engineer. I'm living in a state of, I think for the last week to 2 weeks, my stomach has been in a state of flux. Because for some reason, these election things always get to me, you know? So what I've done now is I've turned it off, you know? I watched, like, the Cubs last night. And by the way, that didn't help with the stomach, you know? Because why would you put people through that?
You start to suffer from anxiety because of the election, because you just get so heated and so close, you just get on that emotional roller coaster?
Yeah, because what happens is, first of all, you pick a side. I mean, I picked a side. Maybe not everyone does, but I picked a side. So you don't want that other side to win, and then you don't even want to hear the crapola that comes out of the other side. I'm sure the other side feels like it's a crapola coming out of their side. I'm just dealing with my stomach now. I don't give a damn about anyone else's stomach. So I turned it off. I've been watching The Voice, which is more soothing. And then, last night, you watch the Cubs. Now, I'm happy with the outcome logically because the Cubs, as you know, hadn't won since 1908.
Yeah.
The Indians hadn't won since 1948. So the Cubs first in line to win. Okay? If you go by 40 years.
Just going by.
Okay? So the Indians, they'll get through, and they had their little what you call it?
Timing.
They had the little Cavalier thing, so they all right.
Cleveland?
Yeah, Cleveland.
Yeah.
So they'll be all right.
No, but you're doing the right thing.
But they didn't have to turning it off. Yeah. But the Cubs last night decided, okay, well, listen, you think you can get away from the politics? And by the way, I stopped watching sports long ago for this very reason, that they're going to take the game. It's nice little 6-3 comfort zone, but with 2 out and 2 strikes. And I know, and the guy was 0 for 3. He got to take the ball and jack it out. He didn't hit it. He, when they say jack it?
No, what's that?
On a string, like when he hit it so hard it just blasts out. It didn't go take your time so he could look.
Yeah, no.
You know what I mean, Kendrick? He just jacked it out of the park, man. And I say, you see, that's the same thing. Then they go and tie. And go to a 10th inning. I don't need this. I don't need this at 12-something at night. Okay?
All this means nothing to me. I don't follow
baseball. Okay. You watch the Ken? No. Okay. So this is, I'm giving you the thing just to stress you out even, So they get to 10 and guess what happens? Rain. They got a rain delay. Come on. The 7th game of the World Series with the Cubs and the Indians who haven't won since everything with 1948 or 1908, right? And now it rains? Come on.
I wasn't checking for that.
So then, this is this. I don't know what happened. I think I must have went to go and, doing doo-doo or something like that. Next thing I know, I come back, it's 8, another 8, 8-6 in the 10th inning, Cubs. 2 out. Fella hit another thing, gone 8-7. They take it to 2 out.
You're talking to Kendrick, really.
And then finally, I'm talking to the people listening too.
And the people who know.
And then, you understand baseball. And then, of course, then they got him out. So they had to take you all the way to that roller coaster ride, right? So, but,
So that's what you spend the evening doing, just watching?
Well, this is kind of historical if you follow baseball. I mean, it's a big deal.
I'm happy for them. I was busy watching the Country Music Awards last night, and you couldn't escape politics because it was from start to finish. It was
all of them and there's Trump. All of them.
Well, some of them didn't seem like it.
That's your rolling Ross over there.
Lots of country folks up in there.
So let me ask you another question. How is it possible, and I'm going to do a Trump on you now, how is it possible to have that dress and not see, in the words of Trump, some gina? Did you see that dress Beyonce wore?
Yeah.
How is that possible?
Because it was strategically made to
So suppose she just shift.
That's why she kept her dance moves kind of very subtle, Like there was more upper movement.
Did you see it?
Upper body movement.
Open it up. Look up Beyonce and Dixie Chicks.
This girl's so overexposed. It's getting on my nerve. Like,
I
I know the people were upset because she performed at the Country Music Awards. I don't have a problem with that. Yeah, there are lots of people who are upset about it. They, because they feel like she's been making a lot of political statements of late because of Black Lives Matter, and they didn't want her infiltrating that.
She wrote that was her song.
That was a song, and I understand why she was there because it was more of a country song. But what I'm saying is, I'm having Beyonce fatigue because I can't turn on any show.
Yeah, well,
I not see
I already
her there.
told you my view on her as far as I'm concerned.
And I like her, and I like the song, but I'm just over it.
If you can have hips that wide, have some bazooms to go with it. It's not bazooms.
No, she's proportionate.
No.
Yes, she is.
Check. Well, that's to you, but
yeah,
to me,
exactly. She's shaped like this. It's nice curves. But I just tired of seeing her.
Yeah. I don't.
And I just looked too drag queenish to me last night.
Did you see the dress, Kendra?
Yeah, you're looking at it.
How you make that? What kind of cloth that is? Hey, what kind of fabric that you can get that to Carrie's?
You can
get that to Carrie's.
To Carrie's?
You can get that kind of cloth.
They can order that for you. Why, you want a dress?
I just want to know where you get that kind of cloth.
You have to order that from Away. Special cloth. Yeah, no, but they made it strategically so it could hide certain body parts in the lower area.
Did she turn around?
Yeah.
Okay.
She twirled and stuff.
Okay.
It was a good performance.
Anyway, I that's not for me. But so then of course I have to say it. We've seen a plummeting in the Clinton numbers from 87 to 65.
Let's see. This was this thing which you like to watch.
538. She's gone down to 65. She was at 87.
Earlier, she had a 67.6% chance of winning. What time is it now?
Yeah, she gone down to 65.
I just printed this. This is a 67.6% chance of winning to Trump's 32.3%.
Yeah, but see, you behind the time. Okay, I'm looking at now 22 minutes ago. That's what the sign said. 65.7.
Okay.
To
his
34.3.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So
it's
still a higher chance than him.
Yeah, but it's tight.
But I told you about my dream.
It's like the squeezing of the thing. I don't even. You know what? I know that you're gonna get upset. I don't want to hear that dream. That dream makes me sick.
I'm gonna say it anyway. I had a dream that Donald Trump, he was pushing his daughter Ivanka, but she was a child.
Yeah.
For all the dream interpreters out there, and she had his face.
Yeah.
And he said something that was so incredibly poignant. In the dream, I was astounded, and I saw the world stand up and clap for him and cheer.
Yeah, he's gonna grab something. That's what he said.
So
poignant.
That might be might be a turning point.
Yeah, the dream.
No.
Yeah. Well, I think you should go on MSNBC and tell them about your dream. Because they don't know
well, next week Tuesday we'll see if it comes true. Because it's but the professor who's been predicting for 30 years. But listen. For 30 years, he's been predicting accurately presidential outcomes, and he's saying that Trump is on track to win.
Yeah, he's wrong. Okay, so...
And how many years have you been predicting elections?
Well, I go with my boy, Nate Silva.
I could go with Alan Lichtman then.
I go with Nate.
Because Lichtman seemed like he knew what he's talking about.
Sooner or later, you see, when you have that...
3 decades.
When you have that track record, like that fellow was 0-3 last night, and he jacked that out.
That's all right.
That's what they're going with. So anyway,
whatever it is, we got to live with it.
So yeah. Well, we'll all have to live with it because we may have to go with slavery again. Yeah. So anyway, what's that? Like I say, like the fellas in South Park, I can just say, listen, if I could talk to HR, that'll be good.
You get in the field.
So
right where your
so that's going on. So the next thing is the thing. We were who was it? I was talking with someone on the phone the other day about the direct, and I see. Look, these people are I know these people, but I'm just tired of the media controlling my thoughts. And I'm in the media, so people say, "Well, who do you think you are?" But I'm not trying to control anyone's thoughts.
You're not?
No, I'm not. I'm not trying to control. Their thoughts. I'm trying to inform.
How does the media?
Well, I find I'm not even forget about the Bahamas. But when you look at what's going on, they just. Do you notice they're not even original from media to media. They stay on the same narrative no matter where you go, the same story over and over and over and over. By the way, they're controlled by the same people. You know that, right?
But tell me how they're trying to control your thought.
That's a little over the top.
Yeah.
But what they do essentially is they control the narrative.
And
okay? They control the narrative.
And you could choose, just like how you chose to turn off the TV, or you don't have to be subjected to it.
But you know what? Let me tell you something. Let me show you how this rocks and roll. Stephen Colbert was saying how, what is his name? Newt Gingrich said to Megyn Kelly, That's her name.
Mm-hmm.
How something's wrong with her.
She's only
because she
interested in
chooses to focus on sex as opposed to public policy.
Mm-hmm.
So Kerber said, "Well, congratulations, because now she's like everyone else, like us." So you can choose the juice that people want to. That people are predisposed to want to hear. You can do that, don't you think?
Yeah.
So that's what I think happens.
I mean, it's all entertainment as well. You know what I mean? You got to keep people's attention. Why do you think we do this banter section for 30 minutes?
Yeah, but I mean, I think that this isn't controlling.
But it's entertaining. It's influential, I'm sure, on some level.
Yeah, I think when we talk about the dress, I don't know how influential that is to people. I don't think anyone's going to go buy the cloth.
Maybe somebody who thought it was decent will look at it in a different manner.
Don't think anyone can buy that cloth.
Well, there you go. And then that's the people who look at it in a different way.
There is humor for humor and entertainment for entertainment's sake, and it's that. When the line crosses between now, see, this is you. So you bring up you highlight something very important. When entertainment under the guise of information, I don't know if it's the opposite way around, or information it's entertainment under the guise of information. Mm-hmm. That's where it gets a little tricky, because a lot of people think, "Oh, you're informing me, you're educating me," but you're not really doing that, are you? I mean, I don't know. That's up to everyone to decide.
So and then people have to be smart enough to sort of dissect what's being said and say, you know what, I'm going to accept this or I'm not going to accept this.
Well, you just said it, so I'll leave it at that. So
yeah.
The new thing out now is, and I'm going to be honest with you, I'm ignorant on this. I don't know the details.
Well, then maybe we
the thing with Gray, with Alfred Gray, because we're gonna have a break. We'll come back and we'll talk about Alfred Gray, because I want to see what you folks know about it, and to see if we can just get to understand what is what. Because I think I can understand some basic stuff from what I read.
About this, because I don't want to comment on.
So we'll just ask the questions. We're not going to come to a conclusion. We can ask some questions, right? We can ask some questions. We'll be right. Yeah. Before we go into, because this is the real, this is what the people like, the real salacious stuff, but it's historically significant, I suppose. Our man Harry. You know Harry?
Mm-hmm.
You met him?
Yes.
What you and him saying? Because he like y'all.
He invited me over.
Yeah, I know that, because he liked the chocolate mamas. He liked that Yoo-hoo. You know Yoo-hoo? Have you ever had a Yoo-hoo?
I've never tasted Yoo-hoo. It looks nasty.
It's chocolate milk. Don't worry about it. You like chocolate milk?
Sometimes.
Okay, well, that means you like Yoo-hoo sometimes. So Harry is reported to be dating. Well, you refer to him as Prince Harry. We go with Harry. Him? We go with Harry.
Okay.
Hank sometimes.
Dirty Harry.
Sometimes I'll call him Hank.
Dirty Harry.
Harry is dating a. Is she from Caribbean?
She don't look black. Was she? Her mommy white and her daddy black. She's a pretty girl.
Where's she from? Did they
At
give
first
it
I'd heard Jamaica, but I ain't sure about that.
Anyway, the bottom line is, down in the palace, we talk very,
I wonder how they feel about that.
Very slow.
If that's true.
Hey? In the palace, we talk very slow. I imagine now we're talking almost on a stop.
I think he's doing this stuff just to anger his grandmother, I swear.
He ain't doing it to anger his grandmother.
I swear.
He's doing it for what?
Oh, what's that? I don't know.
Juicy fruit gum.
What's that?
Double the pleasure, double the fun. No, that's double mente.
I was going to say, that's not juicy fruit.
Yeah, but he double meant, but he ended the juicy fruit. Now, on a more serious note, speaking of which, as you know, Alfred Gray was once quoted as saying, you have to, he's looking for some, juicers, for the fruits that, where they were harvesting and all that. So it's a good segue.
Juicers. Mm-hmm.
Juicers.
Yeah, juicers.
Yeah. Some juicing machines. I think that's what he referred to at one time. I think it was for like tamarind and things like that. Anyway, so here's the question. So there's this big thing going on about who has lied and who is not lying, and you're a liar, and someone is a liar, and everyone's a liar.
Regarding some alleged proposal before the government.
So when I saw the story, today is what, Thursday? Mm-hmm. On Wednesday. Mm-hmm. The impression, and this is, we talk about headline, the impression I got from the headline was that the government of the Bahamas had done a $2 billion deal to lease 10,000 of acres of land to the Chinese and B, grant them fishing permits or licenses to fish in our waters. That's the impression I got.
Me too.
And by the way, from what I saw on the Facebooks, that was the response that people had.
Yeah.
They said, okay.
How are they allowing them to come in here? Yeah.
Now, maybe that wasn't the story, which only goes to show people don't read the story entirely, but because I certainly didn't read it in depth. So there's a couple of questions. Did the government provide grant permission to the Chinese government to lease land and to fish? Now, when I read The Guardian this morning, the story says it shows the letter, or it refers to the letter, right?
The letter was printed in full yesterday, I believe.
And it says the government of the Bahamas government's policy is not to grant licenses for people who are not Bahamians to fish or to be in partnership with foreigners, that is Bahamians, to fish out of the waters.
Mr. Gray said so in the House yesterday.
Right, and that's what seemingly what the letter said, right, or the thing. The other thing it said is that they could have packing plants and distribution, right. It also said that the land leases would be given to partnerships that were 50-50 Bahamian and right. So all aside from the Chinese issue, let's just examine the rationale of a partnership. Now, I know that many years ago, the government gave Bahamians land to farm in Andros, and I don't know what came. I don't think much came of it. What is your feeling about a partnership with non-Bahamian on a leased property?
I don't have a problem with that.
For agricultural purposes.
I don't have a problem with that. I feel like they could bring a level of expertise and money into the country that we would need in order to make that successful. Right. I mean, because we don't have all the solutions here. I wouldn't have a problem with that at all.
Oh, by the way, it also said, and I could be wrong on this, because I'm just parsing through the story because we're going to get to the juicy part, that all, and I know this isn't even going to be possible, that all of the workers on both the boats for fishing
must be Bahamian,
and for the farms have to be Bahamian. That means that's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. The farm ain't happening. Okay? The farm is not happening. Okay? Because there is not a single farm. Well, that's wrong. I'm going to state that because I don't know that to be a fact. But there are many farms in the Bahamas that are not worked by 100% Bahamians. In fact, there's Leish. They may be worked by 99% non-Bahamian. So that's an improvement on the policy if we go to 100%, which only means that farm ain't happening. Okay? It also said that you could have one.
Do you have a problem with that, though?
No, I don't.
I don't understand what the big deal is about that.
Let me tell you something. The whole of the United States, this is the big issue with immigration, is that locals, no matter where they are, don't get into the farm labor and business.
And that's why they need that foreign expertise. They need the foreigners to come in and
we don't
work
even.
The land.
You know what our problem is?
We don't even
We don't know how to crouch like that. We in the lazy boy. If you could put some lazy boy at the tree, you could if you could recline, and pick. But we can't stoop like that. Okay, that's what I call the refugee squat. We don't have that. Now, having said that, in seriousness, so we can't be in principle, and that's why I said to someone, a friend of mine, I said, what we have to stop doing is reacting and analyzing. Okay, we have to see as soon as we see it, because that's the narrative. 2 billion Chinese
the minute
shrimp
we
fry.
See foreign,
boom.
Shrimp fry. The minute we see foreign, something happens to our brains.
If someone say the foreigner coming here to give us all gold, what foreigner? We don't stop. We just don't stop and analyze. Okay. Now, I'm not supporting. I'm not, because I don't know the intricacies of this deal. I'm only reading because I can make you another bet, Rogan Smith, that a good 90-something% only read the headline. I can I'll bet you on that. Yeah. A good 90% only read that headline, and that's the panic right there. What they say, Chinese farming fish, we ain't got no more conch. They gone right to no more conch. Okay? Now, this is what's interesting about this whole thing. So, the issue first seemed to be, and I don't know if I'm right or wrong on this, that you, Mr. Gray, I'm calling him Mr. Guy, said
to the ambassador,
make a deal.
You could go ahead and have a conversation.
You go ahead and have a conversation.
Yes.
And I don't know if he denied that he said that, or if something else was put forward, and the newspaper then focused on that he.
Okay, listen. So what they're saying is that I guess that he gave authorization to develop further a proposed $2.1 billion joint venture initiative. What he's saying is, I only told him he could go ahead, he could proceed with the conversation.
But according to this, he also said you can proceed with the conversation, but make sure they know that these policies are in place, and you cannot, this is the policy. Yeah. It has to include this. That's all I'm reading. I'm just reading that. Did they say that he didn't say that? I don't know. Or what was it that they said?
I think the issue was about him saying that the letter that was printed yesterday wasn't printed in its entirety, and he's saying, and the paper is saying, no, we did print it in its entirety for everybody to see. So, because at first I think he was saying they left some things out, and so the paper is saying, no, the letter is on full display and nothing was removed for everybody to see.
And he's saying they didn't do the whole letter, and they're saying he did the letter. That's what our testicles are shrinking about. That's where the shrinkage is coming in?
He said the statement was not published in full by the press. And then National Guardian said that statement is false.
Let me say this, and we have the Archbishop in the other room, so I'm going to be very cautious about saying this. Do we give two hoots? You notice that's an Archbishop phrased statement. Do we give two hoots about the letter and all that? Why are we not analyzing the deal? I don't know if that is the thing, if that's what we're arguing about, because I really don't know.
That's a missing
point.
But
if we're only arguing about, well, he said.
But I'm looking at the headlines that says Gray tells a lie, and the second statement says, referring again to the fact that the statement wasn't published, the letter wasn't published in full. They're saying that statement is false. It was published in full, so that could only be reference to the headline Gray tells a lie.
So we delivered the letter then. Okay.
And the fact that because I guess it is kind of a big deal if you say, oh, they're only telling you a half of the story. They didn't put the full, they didn't give you the full 100. They say, no, we did do it.
But let me say this to you, Rogan Smith.
Everything is on display for you to read.
Let me say this to you, Rogan Smith. As a matter of national crisis, if one is concerned, if there are two stories out there, right? And one is that the Chinese, Kublai Khan, is coming to take all of our conch, right? And our okra.
Oh, an okra.
Okay? That's a big story, don't you think? Mm-hmm. If the story is, if the government's policy, successive government's policies have been, we don't want non-Bahamians fishing our waters to protect our resources, that's huge. Juxtapose that to, well, you ain't printing the front letter. Which one is more important to you?
The former.
The former. That means the first one?
Yes, you know what that means.
Well, I just want to, because...
What, in case somebody doesn't know?
I don't know. Maybe a former minister or something like that.
Hey.
So I'm just saying, you see what I talk about the narrative?
So
you
Gray
see what I
said,
talk?
let me just say this. So Mr. Gray said he never spoke with any Chinese and simply gave the newly appointed Bahamian ambassador to China, Paul Andy Gomez, permission to discuss investments.
So let me ask you a question. If you had to ask 100 Bahamians right now what they thought was the status of that deal, what do you think they'd say?
That we basically allowing the Chinese to come up in here. Conch?
Conch gone.
Yeah, all that seafood.
Rupa gone?
I'm pretty sure.
Okay.
There's just be like the Dominicans coming in here and poaching us, and then they're letting the Chinese go ahead and fish in our
That's
waters.
like a combo fry rice.
Yeah.
But the thing is, that's very racist. But anyway, listen, this is what kills me. This is what I see, Rogan, and I mean this, and I'll take all the criticism from everyone for it. There's a lot of things to criticize, but what I see is something comes out, and I see within seconds a reaction that is often, the juicy piece, not maybe always accurate, and then we spend another week or so parsing. Blowing out of proportion and then parsing. There is no stop and analyze what this is about.
I
and
totally
ask
agree.
the Bahamian people, do you feel that this piece of accurate facts, this set of accurate facts, do these things jibe with what you wish for the development of this country or not? As opposed to now we're talking about, well, he ain't printed for a letter. So that's a crisis right there.
Yeah.
Boy.
Anyway.
News. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Ed Fields here along with Rogan Smith. Our guest this evening is going to be the Bishop of the Anglican Diocese, but we'll be back with him in a second. But you wanted to talk, Rogan, about...
this story that Neil Hartnell wrote in the Tribune yesterday about this auto dealer warning that he's considering quitting. This is the auto mall boss, Fred Albury, and he's talking about the fact that there's a lot of oversaturation in the market. A lot of vehicles are being imported at a high volume, and so they're not able to sell a lot of the cars that they were selling in the past. And those sales, of course, are crucial to their bottom line. And
listen, there are two sides to the story.
But it's a sign of the times too, though. Not to cut you off, because I think back on how things have changed in the Bahamas, because back in the day, so many Bahamians wanted like brand new vehicles, and now they just can't afford them. So what they're doing is importing these vehicles from Japan because they're cheaper, more efficient.
Well, mainly cheaper.
But more efficient, gas efficient.
It's a two sides to that story. There's one side of, yes, it's a free enterprise, and people should be able to do what they wish. The other side, I think, is more the concern of, is everyone up against the same set of rules? Like, for instance, just to throw an example, like, are the people who are lined along R.M. Bailey on the same set of rules as the people in the mall in terms of licensing and paying VAT? I don't know. I mean, I don't know, but that's the question you put out there.
If they're not making $100,000 a year,
well,
they don't have to pay VAT.
But licensing
they may be licensed. I think
should we have allowed that to happen? You realize that's an allowance over time. That's not. Let's set that up there.
I mean,
just kind of like 1, 2, 3.
I hear you, but doesn't it speak to the creativity of our people? Because they don't have to spend a lot of money on brick and mortar structures. They could set up a roadside, and many of them may have permission to be out there. We can't assume that they don't.
No, I know they have permission. The point of the matter is how did that arise? I'm saying to you that what happens is that many things happen that end up being, and we know all of them, there's a whole range of them, that end up being normalized. But anyway, it's the way the world flows. Well, we're happy to have with us today Bishop. And I assume he emphasized me to say bishop because he didn't wish me to say archbishop. Because that's a whole different range in your diocese, in your denomination, right?
That's
Bishop
correct.
White?
That's correct.
Because archbishop is below you.
No. The archbishop is the person who is
he's the top dog.
over the bishops.
Yeah, he's the pope.
Yeah. So the church in the province of the West Indies, made up of 8 dioceses, of which the Bahamas and the Turks and Caicos Islands is one. That grouping is headed by an archbishop who happens to be at this time John Holder, who is the Bishop of Barbados.
Okay.
But formerly, the Archbishop of the West Indies was Drexel Gomez, who happened to be the Bishop of the Bahamas and Turks and Caicos Islands. So the Archbishop is an elected position from among the sitting diocesan bishops. And that person is the head of the province.
It's a lot to take in.
You got to go to school just for that then. That's confusing. I'm confused. You're saying that's a... All right, so you're the bishop of the diocese of the Bahamas and Turks and Caicos, correct?
That's correct.
that doesn't necessarily warrant the title of Archbishop.
No, it's not.
But it could.
I'm just a bishop.
But could you be?
Well, what I'm saying is the province of the West Indies,
right.
the Anglican province of the West Indies, is made up of 8 dioceses.
Okay.
And this diocese is one.
Mm-hmm.
And the diocesan bishops gather and elect from among themselves a first among equals, an archbishop, who is the leader of the region.
Okay. Kind of like the cardinal level. I'm trying to equate. I was brought up a Catholic. Don't do it. Don't waste my time. Right?
Yeah, it's not, it doesn't
equate like
equate
that.
equally.
Okay.
No.
So first of all, how are you doing?
I am well. Happy to be alive.
It's astounding when I think we're just getting up in there. Maybe because I don't feel like I'm 58 years old.
But you are.
But I am. Thank you for re-emphasizing that. And so it's kind of like bizarre to me that someone who we used to shoot marbles and things like that. At that age, like you are this elevated. It's just it's a thing. It's a thing, Leish Boyd. Okay, not to mention everyone. I thought you controlled Boyd subdivision because your last name was Boyd. That's where we grew up. But no, it's good to have you. Let me ask you, just get for people to understand this. And I remember this very clearly. You weren't necessarily playing in the yard necessarily, if I recall. I think you were a lot more serious. But what made you determine, I assume at a fairly young age, that this was the path you wanted to go on?
Well, first of all, I did play in the yard and in the street.
In the street.
But remember, you lived at one end, and I lived at the other.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
So when
I hit different yard, different street.
When I hit my tennis ball, it would not have broke your window. All right. As a young man, I grew up doing all the things that children do in the 60s and the 70s. And I grew up in the church. I was a member of St. Agnes Anglican Church. And I grew up in a home where not just church, but Christian values and living for Christ was important. For most of my growing up years, I wanted to be a physician, a surgeon.
Your mother was a nurse, right?
No, that's my aunt.
Your aunt, okay.
My mother was a civil servant.
Okay.
But
I remember the term Nurse Boyd.
So that's my aunt. In fact, 2 aunts.
Okay.
2 aunts were nurses.
Okay.
With whom I spent lots of time, so people always thought I was their son. Okay. And in the middle of my teens, I became aware of a call to become a priest. Now that's very unusual, and often calls step in and interrupt what you're doing. But the thought came into my mind, and my first reaction was to run from it, because I had already determined that I wanted to be a multi-millionaire, and in my view, being a priest
that was another track.
Did not relate to that. But I ran away from it, and I tried to pretend it wasn't happening. But God, who first put the thought in my mind, you should be a priest, persisted, and eventually I had to accept that this is where I felt I was being called. And I remember going and first of all talking to my mother about it, and she simply said, you have to be whatever you think you want to be, or whatever you think you're being called to be. And she said, just study hard, get the best education you can get, and let God direct you.
And see where it goes.
And I also spoke to my parish priest, the late Archdeacon William Thompson, and he said, I remember him saying, that's a very good thing. And you should pursue that if that's what you feel. And so as I finished that academic year and went on to the next, I became more and more resolved that this is what I was being called to do. And once I embraced it, I was very happy and comfortable with it.
Good.
Was that something that you shared with a lot of people? I mean, I know you said you told your mom and Archdeacon Thompson, but I mean, did you say that to friends, or you just kind of kept that?
I did. Once I had gotten past the point where I stopped running from it, when I embraced it and found peace and resolution with it, I shared it. And, got varied reactions from my friends, but mostly support and encouragement. Some people thought I was strange, but that's to be expected. Yeah. But my friends didn't stop being my friends. No. And they accepted that as a part of who I was.
Right.
Leish, and I'm not being disrespectful, I hope, so I'll say Bishop Boyd. When we were growing up, and, I feel like super cliched to say that kind of stuff because you hear this all the time when we were growing up and went back in my day and all that sort of thing. But we certainly know that when we were growing up and our parents would then say to us when they were growing up, I think the gap or the harshness of the times were not as wide. That's the feeling I get, that my mother, there was a degree of innocence that she had about the world that was imparted upon me, that when I came to know the world more, so that the gap became a lot wider, and that the gap is even more wide between my child and me now in terms of what they are bombarded with, what exists. And we grew up in community. Where did that go? Is it here? Is it, I don't know if you saw my post talking about you as a community leader, essentially. But do we have that? Is it still here?
We still have community. Community still exists in many forms all over this country. And the people who come to the Bahamas from outside are able to see it and appreciate it in a way that we can't, because they come from societies that are much more secular, much more impersonal,
dispersed,
much more post-Christian. Okay, but we have community. Now, we cannot deny that the nature of Bahamian society has changed over the last few decades. Okay, since the time when you and I were boys and teenagers in Boyd Subdivision, we cannot deny that. But the world we live in is a world that is getting faster and faster in its pace. And the world we live in is a world of technology. And, technology is outdated every couple of years.
Future shock.
So, yes, the pace of the world is faster and faster. The things that our children are exposed to and have to live with are things that we would not have had to deal with so much in our time, but that's the nature of human society. Human society evolves, but there is community. And what we have to try to do in our modern world is slow down, stay off the screen a little more, and just continue to live by relationship values and home and family values, because those are still the things that make a society what it is. I don't care how advanced or technological or wealthy or exposed you become, you still need relationships, and those relationships are going to be at their best when there is commitment in relationship. And you still need various types of community, a home, a neighborhood. You still need those things if humanity is going to be at its best, particularly when you have to raise children. See, when you're in this world by yourself, it doesn't matter. Or when you're an adult, it doesn't matter. But when you have children who you have to protect and nurture and help to reach their full potential, then you appreciate the values, for example, that make up a society, and the stability and the respect that you need to create that framework for that child to reach his or her full potential.
The community isn't stable, though, and it's not a good environment for you. I mean, because that happens as well. I mean, so what happens is parents try to isolate their kids or, insulate their kids because the society is just degenerated to a point where they don't even want their kid exposed to that.
Well, parents always have to make decisions with respect to what is best for their children. And there are always influences that are bad out there. And there are some areas that we live in that may not be the best areas or the safest areas. That's the reality. But parents always have to do their best to give their children the best chance. And so they may have to isolate them, protect them. They may have to control their schedule and focus them into positive activities. They may have to try to get them to keep company with good friends rather than friends who are bad influence. Those are the things that parents have to do in any generation and in any society.
I want to ask you, this is a very kind of complex question, but I will put it to you as simply as I can. And it's with regard to the role of the church. Okay? So I grew up in the church. I wanted to be a priest at one point. We all grew up in the church. It's like we all grew up in the church at some point.
Certainly did.
Right.
Yes.
Maybe not so much now, but certainly in my generation. But one of the things that I feel, I suppose, perplexed about is the seemingly inability, or the seeming inability, for the church to do what it needs to do in terms of uplifting, keeping the community together, keeping values intact, while adjusting to the changes of a changed society. Because the reality is, change is inevitable. Otherwise, we'd still be cavemen. I mean, let's face it. I mean, it's not going to stop, right? Change will happen. The community will change. Technology will happen. How has the church been, and I'm going to be negative here, been behind in making the adjustments in a timely manner to keep up with those changes?
Now, you've asked me several questions.
And that's why you wrote
them down. You talked about the inability of the church to do what it is supposed to do. I'm summarizing.
Right. And how would you...
Well, first of all, it is not the church's job to do everything.
Okay.
The church is one component within the larger society.
Okay.
It is an organization. It has a structure.
Right.
But the church is based on belief in Jesus Christ and how that belief impacts the lives of persons and how those persons seek to live and create activities and communities that perpetuate those values. Okay? Now, the church...
If I could just say this for a second, and I want to be more generalistic, but and I'm saying in this context, certainly in the Bahamas, Jesus Christ, etc. But I'm talking in a general sense in terms of whatever faith you might be following. But yeah.
Yes. Okay. The church cannot do everything. The church does what it can do. The church has followers, persons who attend it. The church in any community reaches out and does things outside of its membership. It affects the community. Church persons are involved in every aspect of society because they have jobs, they have community involvement. Church leaders don't just speak to their congregations or their followers, but they have a persona and an air in the wider community. So the church does what it can do and has a tremendous voice and influence all over the society. The church, however, is only one arm of the society. And remember, what is the church? The church isn't a building. It's not just an organization or a fellowship. The church is comprised of the people who believe and who follow Jesus Christ, if we take the Christian church. And so the church's influence and the church's ability cannot be measured simply by looking at the leaders of the church or the structures of the church or the buildings of the church. You have to look at all of the people who are involved in the church, all of those who claim to be members and who... Now, I'm going somewhere with this. And so what that means then is that if you are talking about the ability or the inability of the church, you have to look at all of those various groupings and what they do. And remember, the church and what the church proclaims is only as powerful as how those who follow it live, how those who are outside of the church are receptive to the church's message. Because there's no point in talking about God or Allah or whatever religious group you're talking about if the full effect of whatever that organization has to offer will not be seen if persons aren't exposed to it and if persons don't respect it and see it as something viable. So when you start talking about the ability or the inability of the church, it's not a simple question. No. And what many people do is they say the church should be doing this or the church should be doing that. Yeah. And the church is only one entity within the wider society, albeit, I believe, a powerful one.
Well, now, and that's the crux of the question: is the church over time? And we're going to take a break, and we'll answer this question on the other side, right? Does it try to compete with those other scenarios in terms of a dominant role? Because there's this pulling and pushing and pulling on who occupy, the separation of church and state, all of those. Anyway, when we come back, we'll discuss. We'll get into that some more. Ed Fields here, along with Bishop Laish Boyd, and I get listen. As I said, Bishop, we do this show for the purposes of reflection. To be honest with you, we're not. I don't think it is certainly not my attempt to Rogan and I to push people in one direction or the other, but for them to be able to listen and to hear from people like yourself and to reflect. And I know that I'm very concerned about our community, and I say our community as opposed to our country, our community. A friend of mine said to me the other day that we are imploding. And I know you referred to the fact that others come from the outside and they see, we have a good time and we get along and we have good big families and all this sort of thing. But I see a lot of frailties, and it seems to me that these frailties are overcoming what is good. Would you care to comment on that?
Life is imperfect, and human society has many, many imperfections in it. We also know that life brings with it its share of challenges, and every single one of us face those. I think it's a mistake to look at all the bad that is happening and allow that to influence our outlook on life. The reason being, every society has its challenges. If you complain about the Bahamas, you can go to other societies that are worse off, and when those persons come to visit us, they think this is paradise. Okay. What we have to do is realize that our challenges are there. And I think as human beings and as Christians, because I'm speaking from the Christian perspective, I don't just work here. My life is built upon a relationship with Jesus Christ. That's the heart of who I am. Okay? And I think that we have to look at life in terms of its positives. There are many things that are happening that are bad, but there are many things that are happening that are good. And we have to admit that often the bad in our view outweighs the good.
The tainted apple.
Bad things generate conversation. They generate emails, and they generate communication on Facebook, and they generate discussion at the water cooler and telephone conversations. People don't necessarily take that amount of time and energy to talk about what's good. I'm not saying that there aren't all sorts of challenges around us, but I'm saying that we have to meet whatever those harsh realities are, with the only weapon that we have, and that is ourselves. And our perspective. And as we look at the world, we must be conscious of what's going wrong, but we must also be people who count the blessings and who see our world as half full, or see our cup as half full, not as half empty. That's not going to change the crime rate. That's not going to change the miserable coworker. That's not going to change the unjust structure immediately. However, if we seek in the midst of the bad to see the good and to say our cup is half full, then something happens within us.
But do we have and we're being devil's advocate here, is there a danger in thinking that half full is good? And when I say that, I don't mean that it's bad, but if I'm in a desert and I have a half cup of water, well, I'm happy until the water's gone. Okay? And so if I don't think about how do I find some additional water to replenish the water that I'm going to ultimately have to drink to get me through this desert, then maybe I'm resting on my laurels, so to speak. And I share your approach. Believe me, I do. I think that we often focus on the negative. Even when we try to solve something, we focus, oh, well, that can't happen, or we can't do that. But is there a danger in and maybe that's because, I often find that many of us do see it rosy compared to other places. We say it all the time, but that's what maybe holds us back, in my view, sometimes.
Well, there is always a danger that a person can lose his or her perspective. We can't be so positive that we're not realistic, okay? Or we can't be so enthusiastic that we're foolhardy. We have to strike a balance. But what I'm saying is that as we look at the world, what is important is our perspective and our outlook. And that begins inside of us. If we just see the bad and catalog the bad and talk about the bad, and we allow that to overwhelm us, number one, we won't count the blessings, and there are always blessings to be counted, and we won't allow ourselves to have a positive perspective, because what we may call horrible, someone will come from somewhere else and see all sorts of good, because where they come from, they've got some other horrible things. So it's a matter of perspective. We must always keep in balance. If you go out of balance, you're going to have a problem. Appreciate and understand what's going wrong. Count the blessings. Yeah. Let that influence your perspective on life, on problems, on difficult people, on unjust structures. You see, often we cannot change people and things immediately. But if we build ourselves, then we have a weapon which can influence people and circumstances and structures for the good. That's how walls have been broken down throughout the course of history, not because one individual had all the power, but because one individual had an outlook, perspective.
Well, we talk about it all the time.
And that was infectious to those around that
we talk
person.
about it all the time, just how you keep your property, for instance.
Indeed.
If everyone just did their piece. Go ahead.
Bishop Boyd, just an aside, but I was reading an article a few weeks ago. It was talking about the decline in attendance in churches in the United States over the number of years. How are things holding in the Anglican Church? I mean, have you seen a decline with your members, with your membership and your attendance?
Generally speaking, church attendance across the board is less than it used to be.
Significantly so, or just marginally?
I would say it would depend on which congregation you're talking about, because every congregation is different. True. It depends, but I think across the denominations you would see a decline in numbers, and that is a sociological thing, if you want to put it that way. People have more options, more freedom, more ability to walk away from strictures than they used to have. Society is just freer and has more options. And so people exercise those options. People generally do not go to church as much as they used to. Many, many people still go to church, mind you. But if you look at society 20 years ago, if you look at society 40 years ago, you would be able to see that there is a basic difference. Now, persons still go to church. Churches are still full. But I would say that over the last 40 years, you would have seen a decline.
And when you say the options, too, you're talking about like they have an opportunity to stay at home and watch a pastor come on TV and
or just not go.
Or just not go or do. If you look at the way that society has changed, the weekend becomes a time when people do things they don't normally do during the week.
Right.
When we were growing up, Saturday was your day for chores, Sunday was your day for church. That is shifted now. You know, people use Saturday to do their errands. Sunday is their family time. Many, many people just don't see church as important.
And also, too, when we were growing up,
that's the reality.
You had to go to church. So when you talk about options, I mean, you had a family structure.
A family structure with a set of rules
and
a community expectation which exercised a great degree of influence over more people. That influence is no longer there because people simply have more freedom.
Does that worry you at all?
Yes and no. It worries me because it's a part of the overall decline of what makes a society strong and which makes human beings their best. Okay. I've explained to you in brief why it happens, so I understand what's happening. And it is a part of a trend that we see society-wide and worldwide, where for many people, religion and its structures are no longer as important as they used to be. Do I think that the church is any less powerful or important in its message? I certainly do not. I believe that as the world faces all of the challenges now that we didn't have to face when we were young people, as I was saying earlier, I believe that faith in Jesus Christ and a participation in a fellowship of believers and the positive grappling with the questions on one's faith, those are the things that we need in this modern world more than ever, because they provide us with an anchor.
Right.
You know, going at breakneck speed, spending all your life on a screen is not going to bring you the settlement and the satisfaction that some more traditional and sedentary values are going to bring you. So the world needs faith now more than ever.
You know, I was at dinner once with someone, and I don't know how it came up, but we were talking about Russian society. We got a break? I'm talking about Russian society, and I'll talk to you about why I said, you know, I fear the Russians. And I couldn't figure out why they were so different. But when we come back, we're going to talk, and I'll tell you why I thought it was an interest. I know it sounds way out, but we'll like you say, we'll be going somewhere with that when we get back. Ed Fields here along with Bishop Laish Boyd. We've got about 15 minutes left to go in the show. And I started talking about Russian society, and I was firmly corrected in my overgeneralization of that. But what I suppose, let me rephrase that. I've always felt, and I'm not one would call a highly religious person at this stage in my life. But this is what I do know. That the one thing that I can say, there are many things, but one of the things that I can say that religion and faith has done, let's focus on faith rather than religion, is diminish chaos. Okay? That it brings a value system, it brings a coexistence, a brotherliness, a neighborliness, a sense of community to a community that allows for harmonious living.
Indeed. And Jesus was very big on that, because if you just look at his disciples and his followers, he brought together people who in the society of his day were separated by, an abyss, but he brought people together. And that's the influence that God has. God is a God of unity, the breaking down of division, the bringing people together, and encouraging people to celebrate that which makes us human, that with which all of us have been created as human beings.
Well, we had T.J. Morrison on. Mm-hmm. And again, it's kind of an odd thing for he and I to have this kind of discussion. But the thing that he highlighted, that I recall, was very, very telling, was the thing of love. Mm-hmm. That somehow if we could, I know it sounds all kind of, in this day and age, wishy-washy, mm-hmm. But if we could somehow focus on that, of the whole stuff with the golden rule, the love one another, mm-hmm. and is that just not? How is that not applicable, Leish Boyd? How is that not applicable to today's world?
Well, I am of the view that it is absolutely applicable, because when we love, we want what is best for the person whom we love. When we love, we respect the person whom we love. When we love, we see a person as someone of worth, even though they may be very different from us in race, in color, in creed, in culture, in socioeconomic status. All of the things that normally divide human beings. Love allows you to see beyond those and to see the value of the person to whom you are relating. And only love can do that. If you just rely on economics, you'll be concerned about how much money you have and how much money the person doesn't have. If you rely on other items of status, but only love can break down those barriers. So it's not a cliche. Right. It's actually a very real and relevant force which the world needs. And the only way the world can experience that, can't experience it in abstraction. The only way the world can experience that is when I walk down the street and meet you and treat you in a certain way.
But how
it has to happen person to person.
How you took the words right out of my mouth, that where you live in a society of economics, of needing to eat, survival, how has economics overwhelmed that? When two people are sitting in a room and dealing with a union negotiation or some sort of scenario, how has economics overwhelmed that to the extent that love can't pass through and take over?
Well, I think it only overwhelms when the values and perspectives of the individuals involved are not as grounded on the things that they ought to be. Okay, because if we're involved in some sort of negotiation, and I'm seeking to get the best advantage for myself at your expense, then while that may be good business practice, that may not be good for human beings.
But even at the basic level, when someone is at the basic level of survival, right? Let's just say, I run across it daily, where someone is desirous of a basic need.
Yes.
And you can't necessarily meet that need for them. And they don't see that. And you must, of course, you run across it every second. They don't seem to understand. There's a thing. They have to survive.
Yes. Well, people can only come from where they are.
Right.
And if they are hurting, or if they are hungry, or if they are in need, that's where they are. But again, the only thing that can bring them from there is relationship. And that's why, one by one, day by day, each of us must seek to make a difference. If you meet a person who is, as you describe, focused on their need, back against the wall,
survival,
concerned about surviving, you may not be able to have a meaningful interaction with them. You would probably need to meet their needs before you can do that. However, you can't dismiss them because of the nature of your first encounter or because of how you perceive them to be. You have to take time and journey with them, and maybe over time you will have a different perspective on that person. But yes, a person can only come to you. Every single one of us comes to the world from where we are, and we come at the world from where we are. So we can't separate what's going on inside of us from how we deal with our friends and co-workers or with the stranger in aisle 7.
How does that challenge leadership? Because I want to ask you what the role of we've always had this role of the church in the Bahamian society. I mean, it happens in every society, but how does that challenge leadership? A leader has to be for quote unquote all the people, and how does that challenge leadership when they have to meet these various needs? They can't necessarily always walk the walk of every single individual. How do they find that path?
Being a leader is always difficult because you have to lead a large group of people and you have to deal with many things that the rank and file really don't have to concern themselves with. But the only thing a leader can do is be him or herself and do that which a leader is supposed to do. A leader can't do everything. You can only lead, direct, inspire. But hopefully from one person, the leader, there will emanate something that touches more than just one person. And then you inspire those people to go out and do, and they inspire someone else. But it is difficult to be a leader, and a leader, the last time I checked, was only one person. And so leaders have to be themselves, do what they're called to do, delegate, and inspire others to do what they can do.
The people have a responsibility too, don't they? I mean, to not have unrealistic expectations of that leader.
Yes, that's always a challenge.
How do they manage that? I mean, how does a leader? How does a leader manage that?
You say that's
always a challenge.
You
have to be up to the challenge.
You do what you can do,
and then
if an expectation is unrealistic, you have to say that's unrealistic. I'll give you a simple example. Very often when persons interact with me, they call to make an appointment, they call to ask me to do something. I will say to them now, I will look at this for you. Call me back in 2 days and I should have an answer for you. If you don't hear from me in 2 days, call me because I need help. I say that to people regularly because while as the leader I may be the person who can do something or effect something, I am only as effective as the support that I have, my staff.
You have to reflect.
My clergy. And so I therefore say to people, if you don't hear from me in a week, you call me.
You say that.
Because I need help. I say that.
Okay.
And so I have to help people thereby to have realistic expectations of me. Okay? And if you say, oh, well, the bishop didn't call me, I then ask the question, did you call the bishop?
Well, we were talking before we started.
And that's realistically and rather simplistically,
right.
But it is a parable of how leaders have to encourage people to have realistic expectations of them.
Right. Well, we were talking at the beginning of the show about how in our role, as I suppose I don't know if this is a leadership role, but certainly we're imparting information, that often what the expectation that we've given people is that we have the answer. And so that when something happens, our reaction is the answer. And rather than taking time to reflect, okay, and to have some courage, I say it this way, to have some courage and to essentially give the facts, give the explanation of the facts, we just go for that reaction and expect to see the fawning and the supporting of whatever. I want to ask you, as we go into our final minutes here, about where we are in terms of development of leaders in this country. Why do we find that there is so much disenchantment? So I can look at Leish Boyd, and I'm sure that you have people who don't feel that you may be a good leader of the church, of your particular church. But the reality is, I assume that as a whole, that's not the case. Why do we, and I don't think there's disenchantment with Leish Boyd. I don't hear a lot of noise in the market about that. Why is it that we don't seem to have, in our political sense, the feeling of confidence in our leadership? What do you think is the characteristic or the traits that are missing?
I think generally today, there is a prevailing attitude that characterizes our time. There seems to be, in many quarters, a suspicion about leaders, a dislike for authority, a suspicion about structures and institutions. Anything that is established comes under suspicion. I can't speak to the specifics that a leader or a group of leaders, things that they may have done to, to destroy confidence in themselves. But I know we live in a society where people generally are suspicious of leaders, disregarding toward authority, uninclined towards structures and traditions. And that's simply the way that many modern people think. I think it's unfortunate because every society needs structures and parameters if that society is going to be at its best. And so we have to find a way to respect and encourage leadership.
Do we contribute to, in that regard, and let's just take that as a model that most people may not have looked at it from that perspective, right? In that regard, are we participating in the decline of our society because the pressure of that we, like you said, the expectations that people place on their leaders, that because those expectations are so high, that the capacity to fail is also so high, and so it's self-fulfilling, and it becomes this spiral.
In some respects, that's true. Being a leader is very difficult, brings with it many responsibilities and pressures. But I think that I have to go back to what I said earlier. We need to appreciate those who lead. And yes, I'm a leader, but there are some people who I look up to as leaders. So I have to appreciate them if I expect people to appreciate me. But we have to support and respect leaders, recognize their heavy responsibility, expect great things from them. There's nothing wrong with that, because if you're a leader, people should be able to look up to you and expect certain things from you. And we have to encourage people with leadership capability to come forward and to offer themselves. One of the problems that we have in many spheres of our society is that the people with the real gifts often do not come forward because they may say to themselves, well, I don't want to get mixed up in that, or I don't have time for that. But being a leader, is not just about glitz and glamour. In fact, many leaders do not live lives of glitz and glamour. Being a leader is about being a servant. Mm-hmm. It is a personal sacrifice that is made for the overall good of any grouping or any society. And because if the society is going to move forward, it has to have leaders. Everybody cannot be the leader. Only 1 or 2 or 3 people could do that. But we have to encourage people with the gifts to see the importance of service and to offer themselves to serve. And that's why it's so important for us to mentor and to encourage and to say to people, you should offer yourself because you can do it. We have to push some people because some people won't go unless their loved ones get behind them and say, look, man, you could do this thing. Mm-hmm. So we all of us need to build leadership by supporting leaders, by nurturing young leadership, and by pushing
young leadership,
pushing our leaders, pushing people with leadership capabilities to the fore, giving them opportunity, succession planning, identifying gifts and giving them an opportunity to step forward.
Yeah. Listen, Bishop Boyd, I hope we can have you on again. You ain't got far to go. You're right up the road over here, right? Right. So I hope we can have you on again. It was a very interesting conversation, very more than you know, semi-timely. But anyway, we will talk to you again sometime. And
please do that.
And and I'm glad that you accepted that because I really enjoyed this.
Well, you've invited me on several occasions.
Yeah.
And I was not able to be here because of travel or commitments.
Right.
So I'm here. And I give you an undertaking that
when I call, if you're around, you'll come.
I shall. Let's plan it.
Okay.
So that I can be available.
Sounds good. Kendrick, Rogan.
Time changes Sunday.
All right. All right. Thank you very much, Shailesh. Bye-bye.